I was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And the early part of my life, I remember going to church 2 or 3 times a week. See, my mom was a missionary kid who grew up in India. And my grandfather, when they ended up moving back to the States, my grandfather planted churches around Michigan. So when I was really young, my dad used to lead singing at church. So we were there at the church a lot. If you end up hearing any noise, I've just got some work going on in the house, so just go ahead and disregard that while I tell this story. So anyway, one of the earliest memories I have, well, around the time I was 9 years old, my dad ended up leaving my mom. It was a devastating time for me. That summer, I went to a church camp, and I went forward and I accepted Christ. And I tell people often I accepted Christ at the age of 9, but didn't know Him till I was 26, because really, there's a huge difference. And so, a few years later, my mom got remarried to my first stepfather. And for all intents and purposes, we seemed like the apple pie family. Everything was great on the outside. We seemed to have it all together. We were always at the church. But nobody knew that he was a closet alcoholic and he was verbally and mentally abusive. The last night that we were there at the house, he had pulled a gun on my mom, threatening to blow her head off. Well, my mom sent me to go live with my dad. I was a freshman in high school. She didn't want to pull me out of the school system I was in. So I had a lot of pent-up anger toward my dad. I felt a little robbed of a childhood because of these things. And so anyway, about that time, I started getting into rock music. Started growing my hair down to the middle of my back. Started singing in a band. My dad's side of the family was convinced I was going to hell in a handbasket. And to be honest, because it wasn't as acceptable on the outside of the church, inside the church rather, to have long hair, I felt more love on the outside of the church than I did on the inside. And so I thought Jesus was cool, but I thought the people inside the church, I didn't want to have anything to do with them. So I didn't for years. So I proceeded to go down the path that I was going down. So I got involved with drinking, smoking a lot of weed, playing in a band, and all this stuff. My girlfriend at the time had become my quote-unquote rock. When she ended up breaking up with me, didn't really know how to handle it, I beat her up. So now, my mom ends up sending me to a Christian counselor. She says, I don't want you to turn out like this. And so she sent me to a counselor thinking that, it was all going to take care of it. Well, the next gal I ended up dating, on several different occasions when things got kind of chaotic, I ended up beating her up. So now it's not just a one-off situation. Now I'm a dirtbag. Now this is who I am. And so couldn't stand who I was. Just continued to spiral out of control in that regard. Was hanging out in the clubs, getting involved with strippers. I actually lived with one, got one pregnant. She had it aborted without me even knowing about it. And so and she and I had like this Jekyll and Hyde kind of relationship going on. We would beat each other up. The last time I ever hit anybody, she had me thrown in jail. So I ended up spending the 24 hours in jail. It was the best thing that happened to me because, I never hit anybody from that point, but the anger that I had that was pent up for all these years, it had to go somewhere, and it showed up verbally. And so I would lash out and verbally rip people apart. So anyway, in '94, I met this gal that was working with this mutual producer that I was working with my band. We got married in '95. And so in February of '96, she came down in Nashville, performing on the Charlie Daniels show. She wanted to be a country music artist. I wanted to be a rock star, all this good stuff. So came down here, and I ended up saying, hey, Teresa, we need to move down here. For some reason, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to raise my kids. She said, you know what, let's move in a year. And I said, if we say a year, we'll never do it. Let's do it in 6 months. We ended up doing it in 4 months. And 6 months later, I'm working on Music Row. And after a while, as she and I are doing the music business thing, after a while, the only thing that she and I had in common anymore was getting drunk and high. And so I'd wake up in a puddle of my own urine. I'm passed out at different people's parties, embarrassed, trying to get out of there without anybody knowing. I peed all over the rug. It was really embarrassing, pretty pathetic. This one music business party, I stayed completely sober. The next day, I ended up talking to her, and I said, Teresa, what happened to us? There's no way you would ever guess that we were a married couple. Let's get counseling. Well, she got mad at me because she had mentioned that to me so many times before. She didn't know this, but that night, as she's getting ready for bed in our bathroom, I got down on my knees in our bedroom. And I began to pray, and I said, God, this is not the life you intended for me to have. I can't get a handle on this drinking thing, this dope thing. I'm destroying my marriage. I don't care what it looks like. I want to be on the road that you have for my life. So whatever that is, my life is yours. 1 week later, she and I celebrated our 4-year anniversary. It was a Thursday. Everything seemed cool. 1 week to the day, I got off work. I opened up my front door. Half the house is cleared out. There's nothing but a note there, sitting by the bouquet of flowers I gave her the week before. And he said, Mark, I'm leaving you. So I dropped to my knees. I remember hearing my old youth pastor when I was in middle school, Pastor Norman Miller, talking about Jesus being the Prince of Peace. And at that moment, that's all I had to go on. So I proceeded to just call out to God, and I said, God, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this without you. See, the first few days, you're thinking, surely there's going to be a phone call. There's going to be something. But you know what? 2 weeks later is when the bottom fell out. I realized she's never coming back. This is now my life. I'm walking around my block before work that day. I've got tears coming out my eyes. And I ended up calling out to God, and I said, God, I don't care about anything else in the world. I don't care about money. Man, for crying out loud, it seemed like that's what we did, is argued all the time about money. And I said, God, I don't care about money. I don't care about food or anything else on the face of the planet. The only thing I need today, more than anything else, is a hug, and that's it. But I have to know for absolute fact that you're listening to me. An hour and a half later, I went walking into CSAC, which is where I worked. And this guy comes walking up to me and he says, Mark, I came to work early this morning because God spoke to me and He said you needed a hug. That changed my life. That was the beginning of the trajectory that I ended up jumping on, which brought me to this point. So here I am, going on 15 years later, just running after Christ harder than ever. And I'm telling you, I want to invite you out to One Stone Nashville, especially as we get ready to start this new series, Alive. Join us 10 a.m. at the East Park Community Center right here in East Nashville. We'd love to have you. Let's see what God is getting ready to do.